Hello and welcome to the Action Coach Business Spotlight. I'm John Boggis, and with my wife, Rona McAteer, we run Action Coach Cambridge, helping businesses right across the Cambridge region. And with me today, I'm delighted to say I have Joe Jackson. Joe is the founder and director of Spiritus Wealth and also the founder of DIY Money. Hello, Joe.
Hi, John. Nice to meet you.
Really nice to meet you as well. Okay, Joe, just to kick things off and to give us some background, please tell us a little bit about your businesses.
Cool. Yeah, well, Spiritus Wealth is a regulated financial planning business, and we look after, I suppose, affluent individuals who are either in the run-up to, at, or in the early years of retirement. So we're very much sort of retirement planning focused. And what that means is we pretty much from 10 years out before someone is going to retire, we'll have conversations about what their objectives are for their life, what they want to do, how they want to fund things, and then how their money fits into that. And we build retirement plans using an evidence-based approach to give them the best chance of making what they want to happen in the right way, and that show people that their plans are sustainable. And clearly some people come to us and their plans are certainly not sustainable, so sometimes we have to have some difficult conversations too. But it's all about, I suppose, Spiritus is all about helping people through the transition into retirement. People often think that it's an event, it happens overnight, and actually it doesn't. There's a lot of prep that needs to go in the run up to, and then at retirement it's it sometimes can be quite an emotional process. People spend their entire working lives building up their assets, living off their income, and then it seems all of a sudden the whole thing flips over, and they're now not in accumulation, they're now taking income from their assets, and processing that is takes a few months usually, and it's quite a big thing to come to terms with. So yeah, it's as much about emotions and the psychology of it as it is about money, frankly.
Yeah, I remember my dad was terrified of retiring.
Yeah.
And really strongly didn't want to retire, but kind of came to the age where they said, you need to go now. So
yeah. Well, I think potentially your dad's generation had it slightly easier in some ways, because it was almost that, finish work on a Friday, wake up on Monday with your bus pass in your pocket and your slippers on. Whereas now it's much more popular to sort of phase into retirement, leave the sort of high stress, high paying job a few years earlier, go do something more sort of local and part time, and putting all of that together is very, very difficult without some of the tech that we use, and trying to see the whole picture all at once and how it all interacts with each other. Very difficult without having either done it yourself before, because clearly you only retire once, or most people do anyway, but also having that sort of that technology underpin, we find really, really helps.
Okay. And how does DIY Money differ from Spiritus as well?
Yeah, so DIY Money is a startup business that we've been working on for about 16 months at the moment. There's a huge advice gap in the UK. So effectively, there are nearly 30 million people in the UK who don't have access to any kind of professional support when it comes to managing their money. It was really born out of the idea that me, as a mid-30s father of two with a mortgage and not particularly high asset base, is of no sort of professional interest to me as a financial planner. And that always struck me as a bit of a massive problem that was relatively easy to change. So what DIY Money does, it's a subscription-based business where you sign up and you can access effectively a library of video content to take you from where you are right now all the way through to financial competence, allowing you and empowering you to build your own financial plan in a robust and, again, empirical way. The number of times my contemporaries, so I'm 35, my contemporaries have said, Joe, I've just left my job, I've got 2 old pensions, what should I do? Should I consolidate them? If I had a tenner every time that happened, I'd probably have about 60 quid. But these problems that people face are real and important to them, but there is nowhere for them to go, particularly because it's very, very costly to provide regulated advice. Therefore, people dispensing advice tend to focus on people with higher asset, they tend to be older, and so you've got this chasm, this yawning chasm of people who are desperate for guidance and help from a professional with nowhere to go. So DIY Money is an attempt to provide somewhere for those people to go so that they can have a a fighting chance of building their own plans properly. DIY Money goes to market in two ways. It's direct sign-ups through our website, but also we're doing a lot of work in the employers space. Okay. So as a workplace benefit for people in the sort of accumulation phase of their life. And we've had some really interesting chats with some quite big employers who are, very nearly going to roll it out to their entire workforce. So it's an interesting project, one that has really fired me up because it feels like we're kind of making a bit of a difference, which is always nice. And hopefully it's a great success, but time will tell.
Great stuff. I mean, like you say, it sounds like there's a huge gap. So anything you can do to fill that knowledge gap would be very, very welcomed in the marketplace. So,
yeah, we hope so. We hope so.
And so, was that what you were always interested in growing up? Having a financial advice and planning business? Is that what you always wanted to do?
Absolutely not. Like a lot of people, I fell into the profession completely by accident. You might be able to see over my shoulder from Nottingham. I spent most of my childhood watching Nottingham Forest underperform. My family business was always in wine and beer, wholesale and import and export, and we had a family pub and things like that. And then at university, I just thought I don't really want to go into that business. So I did a history degree. And how I fell into financial planning was I got a graduate job for Danone, the yogurt company, as a territory manager down in the southwest of England. Really didn't like that, driving 1,200 miles a week in a VW Jetta with only my dark thoughts for company, pre-podcast years, obviously. And I went to a party, met a mate who was a financial planner, and I said, wow, what you do sounds amazing. Is there any chance that you're hiring? And they were, and then the rest is history. So from a history degree to the depths of financial planning, not quite sure how it happened, but I'm very pleased it did.
That's absolutely brilliant. And when you're thinking about the time that you've had, what would you say has been the biggest issues you've had to overcome so far in business?
Oh wow, that's a big one. So when I started my career, I was in a much bigger practice in the centre of London, sort of learning the ropes. And sort of very quickly after that, I met my current business partner, and we decided that actually we think we can do things a bit better. We were sort of almost ridiculously enough running teams of sort of more junior advisors very, very quickly. And we could see that path being sort of more pronounced, going further and further away from client work and more management of people.
Okay.
And so we just took stock one day and said, actually, let's do it. Let's step out under our own steam and do it ourselves. And that was a huge challenge because clearly starting with a blank sheet of paper, there's beauty in that because you can build whatever you want to, but a huge pressure as well because you very rarely get that opportunity in life. So we've always remained consistent to our sort of business principles, which is there are thousands of advisors out there who are trying to service too many families, and they're far too thinly spread to give decent service. So we cap the number of people we work with. We sort of specialize in that sort of at retirement space, which was a big leap to take because when you're starting a business, you don't want to turn anyone away, but actually the challenge of sort of marketing yourself as a specialist in one specific area does actually start to pay dividends a lot quicker than just being a generalist. Because if you're a doctor and you want to retire, then you search for retirement planning for doctors. Simple as that. You don't go on to, we don't think, a generalist financial advisor's website and feel empowered to make contact. So yeah, I think starting a business in my sort of mid-20s was a baptism of fire. Clearly, I had no responsibilities, or certainly nowhere near as many as I do now. So it was a bit easier for me potentially, but still, yeah, it was a big jump, one that definitely wasn't guaranteed to come off. And we're really pleased that it has done so far. Touch wood, fingers crossed.
Great stuff. And what would you say have been your biggest learnings so far in business and also in life as well?
Learnings in business. Well, when I say I'm a financial planner, for the uninitiated, people think I sit in front of spreadsheets all day, and probably that's an understandable belief. It's actually nothing to do with spreadsheets. I mean, yes, there are the odd one or two and the odd sort of bit of tech that requires a bit of number crunching. The vast majority of it is people, facing and building relationships. And I think in order to have success in a people facing business, and where relationships are so key, is that you just have to deliver on what you say you're going to do. It's just non-negotiable. If you don't know the answer, say, I'll come back to you and check. It's just so important that that relationship built on trust is the thing that you sort of prioritize the most.
Yeah, it's super important. And like you say, something that people often forget in there when they get really heads down in their business journey. You're absolutely right.
Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, exactly. And keep delighting your customers every day.
Yeah, it's so important. Yeah, it really is.
You just can't go far wrong. And
yeah,
who would you say is the first person that would come to mind when you think about success, and why would that be?
Oh, it's a really difficult question. There's a chap that has shaped a lot of my thinking in the financial planning space, a guy called Nick Murray, who, unless you're a fanatical financial advice reader, you just won't have heard of him. He, as far in my view, is at the sort of the very cutting edge. I mean, he's extremely old. I think he's in his late 80s, but he's written 10 or 12 books throughout his career. All of them have been at the very cutting edge of the thinking, and he's really shaped financial planning into what it is today. Now, if your audience haven't spoken to a financial planner recently, they might be forgiven for thinking that they're almost product brokers. So I recommend you move from this pension to that pension because it's better type approach. Whereas Nick Murray and his sort of disciples, without overstating it, have really moved from product brokerage and fund analysis and all that sort of stuff to life planning, objective-led life planning, working out what you actually want to do with your life, and then how do you make that happen using the tools at your disposal, rather than just shuffling assets around in the background to generate commissions. Thankfully, all of that sort of stuff is a thing of the past, and really the person who made that happen, I think, was Nick Murray. So to shape an industry through writing is just awesome. Maybe one day I'll write my own book.
Wow, that is a fantastic answer. I really like that. Sounds like he's made a real big change, because it has to be all about what the end goal is and how do we get there.
One of his mantras is he wanted to do well by doing good. And I think that's just a beautiful thing to say. And it really comes across in his writing.
Yeah, really good. And what for you and Spiritus Wealth, and also DIY Money, what does the future look like? And what do you see as the kind of the main challenges you're going to face moving forward?
Yeah, interesting question. So Spiritus Wealth is a regulated entity, regulated by the FCA. And I genuinely think that's going to be our biggest challenge. The regulator has some wonderful intentions, but sometimes potentially gets its policy slightly wrong. And we're going through something now called the Consumer Duty, which is all about prioritizing client outcomes over everything else. Frankly, something we think we've been doing really well for ever since we've started. But that could be a fundamental shift in pretty much the entire industry. And so if the FCA decide that we're not doing it correctly, then they might start legislating and all that sort of stuff to make it actually really, really difficult to trade. And don't forget what I said about DIY Money and where that was born from. The harder they make it to trade, the smaller the advice community is going to be, the more gap there's going to be for people who actually do need advice. So it's a really tricky line. I wouldn't want the FCA's job. I think on the whole they do a great job. They do get some things wrong, but who doesn't? But trying to negotiate that balance between improving everything and making it ultra perfect in this halcyon world that they see, versus then the practical realities of dispensing advice one-to-one. It's just there is always going to be that conflict. So that's probably a very big challenge for Spiritus. For DIY Money, that sits outside of the regulatory framework because it's guidance only. Probably the biggest challenge is to get employers to roll it out across their staffs, because there's a huge amount of value in that sort of video content and the way that it's digested. I could bore you about this all day, but roughly 2/3 of people don't want to have a face-to-face chat about money to anyone, whether that's the bank, their boss, a financial planner, whoever, financial coach. So having we're British after all, having a library of videos that you can watch on your iPad at 11 o'clock at night when you can't fall asleep I think really does have the ability to make some changes. So yeah, getting people interested in that sort of model and getting it sort of rolled out is probably going to be the biggest challenge.
Okay, great stuff. And what would you say would be the best piece of advice you would give your 18-year-old self, Joe?
It's again another great question. I'm going to rely on my financial advisor's hat, and I'm just going to be really boring and say start saving regularly, even if it's £10 a month. Just put something away, get into the habit of it, because at that age of life, maybe not 18, but maybe 20, 21, when you're starting your career, if you can get into that habit, that is the most valuable thing you can learn when it comes to the pursuit of financial independence. Because even though obviously as you go through your career you hope to be paid more, things like mortgages happen and weddings and children and all of that. Money that you thought was going to be spare is now not spare, and unless you're in the habit of paying yourself first and squirreling that money away, you never will be. So yeah, I wish I'd started a bit earlier.
Yeah, me too. So I think that's a great piece of advice. And just before we finish, is there anything else that we should know about Spiritus Wealth or DIY Money? Anything you're working on at the moment that it would be good to share with the people watching this?
Yeah, so Spiritus is obviously sort of our main business, the one that we've been working on for a lot longer. We currently work with around about I work with 55 families. My business partner works with about 62. We've got scope to take on probably another 15 or 20 families each before we have to close the doors. As I mentioned, we don't want to be spread too thin and start sacrificing on service levels. So bit of a naked one. If you are interested in having a chat with a financial planner who relies on technology and sort of evidence-based approach, then please feel free to reach out, because we'd love to have a chat, obviously at our expense.
Great. No, that's brilliant, Joe. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Yeah, you can either visit our website, so that's spirituswealth.co.uk, and on there you can book, you can put a call in my calendar, you can get a real feel for how we do things and what we do. Or if you want to email me directly, then it's Joe, J-O-E, at spirituswealth.co.uk.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like that would be a really valuable meeting for anybody. So, Joe, that was absolutely fantastic. Fascinating. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and hear a bit more about your story.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.